Hi, I'm Michael Bookwalder. You join me here today at Staunton Harold Reservoir, where I'm going to run you through some basic tips for long distance feeder fishing. I'm going to try and aim to fish at about 100 metres today, which is a long way in this wind, so I'm going to show you my top sort of tips to get out there and make it really easy. First tip I'm going to give you is you can't fish 100 metres with a 10-foot rod. You need a rod that's built for the job, that's going to make life easy for yourself. Today I've chosen a Distance Master at 4.2 metres and I've put a 4-ounce tip in. The strong tip enables the rod not to flex at the top end, so it avoids crack-offs really. That's the biggest problem with long distance feeder fishing. But the rod's got loads of backbone, especially down this butt section here, so you can really compress it with a big feeder and really punch it out. That's definitely my top tip feeder fishing. Don't be undergunned, and this rod is definitely not undergunned for this kind of fishing today. The second tip for you is reel choice. You need to go for a reel that's going to enable you to fish that distance really comfortably. So I've gone for an Intensity 720. It's got a really big spool, enables the braid to flow off there really quickly when you're fishing a 70-gram feeder. You don't want drag created, it stops you hitting your clip. It's a 4.6 on a retrieve, so it's not too quick. And the last thing you want is a real quick reel to reel back in, loads of spin ups, and you're wasting time. So one reel for the job, perfect. Intensity 720, more than man enough. Braid choice today, on a day like this, is really important. I've gone for an 08 braid today, just the fact I want to try and create as less drag as possible. I'm trying to fish 100 metres, as you can see, it's really windy. So I'm fishing 08 braid and I'm fishing it direct to the feeder. You can do this because our 08 braid's like 13-pound breaking strain, so you're really not going to crack off fishing braid direct. The reason I've gone braid direct is most of you guys will know I always fish a shock leader, or 9 times out of 10, but with conditions like this I'm trying to force the feeder so hard and the cast so quick and the rod speed so quick that when the line's coming off the spool, the shock leader knot can sometimes get caught around this bottom eye. That's just because of the sheer speed you're going at. So by fishing braid direct, I can slow my cast down a little bit more and not worry about the shock leader not getting caught in the rod and breaking off. So for me like this, conditions today dictate what braid. I'm always going to use 08 braid in conditions like this. It's just so much easier to fish with. With braid, don't overfill your spool. See loads of guys fishing with braid loaded right to the rim of the spool and casting out with the braids a bit dry, getting massive wind knots, especially on days like this. I always like to have mine just sat sort of a couple of mil down from the spool. It doesn't really affect the distance you get into, but it massively stops wind knots happening. So it's a real top tip that is. Line lays perfect on there, just sat inside the lip. Definitely don't overfill it. With fishing a long way today, there's only sort of 2 types of feeder you can use really. You've got the original window feeder, or you've got the hex mesh bullet feeder. You can't fish anything like a normal ground bait feeder because you need a weight forward just to get the distance. So these are my 2 starting points. I'll start on this one. I'll put some bait at the start, worms and casters, just to kickstart the peg off. And especially this time of year, a bit of autumnal fishing, it goes a bit harder. Just go straight to the hex mesh. I'll just put neat ground bait in them and just try and work the peg out and start feeding to the bites. Best thing about these little windows is they cast so well at the start. If it gets really windy, another tip, I drop down to the, I know it's virtually feeding like a thumbnail of ground bait, but a 60 gram in a hexagon one, this just such an easy feed to the cast, and when it's blowing a real gale I drop down to that, and when it gets like 2 or 3 bites and the fish start to back off again, quickly swap over, 1 chuck with that just to put some bait out. It's almost like fishing a straight lead because you're virtually putting nothing in, and the best thing about empty feeder, it casts, just people don't know you're fishing it as an empty feeder basically. It's almost like fishing a straight lead, and this time of year where bites are at a premium, a straight lead often on Staunton Harold and big reservoirs like this can get a bite when all else fouls. One common mistake anglers make is they try and get away with too light a feeder. I try and get away with as heavy a feeder as I can as possible. 2 reasons for that. It always casts in a straight line and it gets down quicker. You don't catch many fish with the feeder falling slowly through the water. You get a bite when it's on the bottom, and you get a bite on the bottom when it's in the right place. So get it in the right place with the right weight, gets a bite quicker. For this kind of fishing at 100 metres, there's only one kind of rig I'm ever going to use. It's a helicopter rig. It's so tangle free. Every little beads there, they spin up and down the line. You never ever get tangles. As long as you hit your clip, you're not going to get tangles. When you go in short and it goes doosh, that's when you get your tangles, and that's going to happen with any single rig. But with a running rig and that, the bites are brilliant, but the tangles will be massive. 100 metres, it has to be a helicopter rig. I always tie mine with no knots, so I've basically got braid coming straight down to a snap link, and I've got 2 gripper boss stops there that spin around. I've only got 1 knot on the whole rig, it's here. So, and the best thing about that is, some days you're getting bites that are a bit dunk, 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 some days it's pulling it in. But by fishing it this way, I've got no sort of parameters of where I can have my thing. I can have it right tight down to my feeder. So basically the fish hooks the feeder, 60 gram feeder, it's like dunk, you get the proper bite. And if they're a bit funny, you slide it up. I can slide it up as far as I want. I can slide it right up and fish it as an old style dink dink basically. So it's one rig that covers a multitude of things. It's just such an easy, diverse rig to tie. Straight down, no knots, no issues. Every day of the week for me, a helicopter rig. I'm quickly going to demonstrate now. To cast 100 metres, you've really got to put some action into the rod. There's no good trying to mess about and lob it out there. You've really got to force the rod. So I'm going to show you now the technique I use. Try and keep a straight left arm to pull the rod through to my body to create the power. You can't just plop it, you've got to really rip the rod. So I'm going to show you now. I've got a 60 gram hexagon bullet on, and I'll show you now. Actually, I've got a drop of about 3 foot. Always stand up to cast, makes life a lot easier. Coming back and literally hitting it as hard as that. Follow out, hit me clip there. If I probably hit me clip, cast out a bit too hard, hit me clip about 20 foot above the water. That's 100 metres that is, and it's easily achievable. So follow these top tips, and this will become second nature to you too. I'm going to run you through the process now I use every time trying to chuck 100 metres. It's a process that's not going to let me down. Basically, always think about the wind to start with. Like I've got quite a good wind, 15, 20 mile an hour coming to me right side, so I have to aim a bit right now to compensate for that, to get in the right spot. I've also got to think about the bow then, so as soon as I hit my clip, I'm going to rod down to the right hand side and try and sink the line in the water or the braid down before I bring it to the left and tighten up. So people just chuck it out and leave it. It's not the way to do it. So I'll run through the process now. Bear in mind I'm fishing 100 metres here, so I'm going to give it a fair whack and show you the best way of doing it. It's always best to stand up as well, and I can try and cast sitting down, but standing up's a lot better. So we'll go for the process. Like I say, I'm constantly thinking about the wind now. I can see the bit of ripple coming to me right, so I've got to compensate and go a bit right. So I'm going to give it a real hit me clip, rod straight down to the right hand side now, feeling it down to the bottom, and I'm just about to hit the bottom any second. There we go, hit bottom, so I'll give it a quick flick as I bring it over. I'm now keeping a tight tip as I try and get the rod in place, but I can't put it straight down because I've got a big bow out there, which is totally unavoidable with fishing braid that far out. So by holding the rod and keeping the tip slightly bent when I'm trying to set the braid, I'm not going to miss any bites. So no point in chucking it straight and leaving it. So I'm now to a point where I'm just about to touch on the feeder. So I get my rod in place. I never put my rod rest too low either. I see some guys with it down here all the time. You get affected with wind bites and all sorts. So I like to keep mine out of the water. And generally, fishing for bream and big skimmers on a long distance like this, the rod, you get a good bite. You don't tend to get silly bites, especially fishing braid straight through. It's magnified the whole time. So that's my simple process. It's really simple. Keep an eye on the wind. If it's blowing a hoolie, chuck even further right. And basically with a rod this long, you can move around and try and guide it in. So really important that is. Keeping braid wet is really important. If it starts to become too dry, it comes off the spool too quickly, and that's what gets the wind knots. So I always have a little pole cup beside me here. I literally, as soon as I notice it start drying out, quickly tip it over there. That's the braid wet again now. So you're reeling in braid that's wet on top of wet braid, it just wicks through, so it's really wet all the time. Don't dunk your reels in the water. I've done it before myself, and when it chucks down in Ireland, and your reels just don't like water, so don't dunk them in the water. Bit of water on the braid, that way keeps the reel going forever, keeps braid lasting forever, and avoids wind knots. Hook length line is quite important to me. A lot of you guys will probably thinking I'm a bit of an airy fairy, but I'm far from airy fairy of feeder fishing. I use Sinking Mono as a hook length line. I can't believe that fish see anything in the bottom of 25 foot of water, so I want a real line that's going to reel back in and not have loads of spin ups. And how brilliant our power line and how brilliant AccuPower is, I just like a line that's not going to spin up, and it's just got just proper old school, loads of stretch in it, so I can pull it and fishing braid direct. It gives you that bit of comfort and that. So I always fish £3 or £4, £3 a day, because fishing's really been difficult and bites have been at a premium. If there's loads of bites, about £4. If it's really black, then I put £5 on. It doesn't make any difference to me on the bottom. I can't believe they see it, and for me, confidence is key. So I've got confidence in this to get the fish in, confidence it's going to stretch and not pull out a fish, so I can't see why I would change from feeder fishing using this. I'm going to finish with one top tip. Big reservoirs like this have massive drop-offs and ledges, so there's no point in hooking a fish, whether it be big, small, or any kind of size. You want it in the net. So if it feels like I've hooked like a reasonable sized fish, I'm going to stand up. Got a 4.2 metre rod, so I want to get the fish up and over the shelf pretty quickly. I don't care if people are laughing and looking at me saying, oh, he's standing up for a little fish. Won't be laughing when you're weighing at the end of the match and you've got a big net full of fish. Staunton's quite notorious here. Some of the areas it's full of zebra mussels, so you're reeling over ledges that have got covered in them. So even with braid, like thick braid, you run over the top of that 2 or 3 times, you're going to damage the braid and cut off. So get it up in the air and get the fish in the net. So you notice even with braid straight through now, with that shock leader not being on there, I've still reeled it quite quickly. I've got a decent fish on the end. It's going to be a decent skimmer. But with that line, maybe 10 or 12 ounce, maybe a bit more, maybe £4. But what a way to end our session. A skimmer probably 14 ounces, but without following my tips today and without reeling like I did there, I would probably lost that on the shelf. So get out on the bank, try it yourself, and don't be afraid. I've never broke a rod casting yet, so try your hardest and good luck.